In Sacramento, California, in the atrium of the state capitol building, there is a sculpture. In this sculpture, Columbus is on his knee before Queen Isabel of Spain, and in his hands is cupped a globe, as he convinces the Queen to finance his voyage the wrong way to India. Now, this statue embodies a popular myth that many of us were taught back in grade school, namely that Europeans in the 15th century widely believed that the earth was flat, and that it was due to the courage and vision of explorers like Columbus and others to prove otherwise. Now, this misconception is also spurred along by such American history texts as the American Pageant, which reads, speaking of Columbus's voyage, "The superstitious sailors, fearful of sailing over the edge of the world, grew increasingly mutinous." Now, I'm something of a history buff, and so tonight what I want to talk a little bit about is, first of all, how we know that this is simply a myth, and secondly, how this myth ever originated. Now, we go back in time to Greece. The Greek philosopher in 260 BC, named Aristophanes, used the position of the sun to estimate the circumference of the globe. In later years, Ptolemy, as well as Arab mathematician Al-Farhani, likewise used their own methods to measure the circumference of the earth as well as its diameter. So we know that the ancients had a very good handle on this spherical earth idea. But what about the common people in medieval Europe? Well, in 1321, Italian author Dante published his incredible work and trilogy, Divine Comedy. And no, it wasn't a compilation of BYU humorous skits. That Divine Comedy is performing tomorrow and tickets are still on sale. Instead, what this was a religious allegory where the author traveled into the center of the earth, which metaphorically was hell, and then back out the other side, ascending onto paradise. Now, there's two interesting things about Dante's Divine Comedy. Number one, it was published in the Italian Vulgate, in the language of the commoners at the time, instead of the educated Latin. And secondly, Dante nowhere in his work seeks to prove the earth is round. Rather, he uses it as a presupposition. He assumes that these medieval commoners already believed in it. They already understood what it meant. Well, a century later, along the times of Columbus, there was a Catholic cardinal by the name of Pierre de Lille. And he asserted that between India and Spain, there is sea. Now, this, of course, dismisses the notion that either the poor class or the Catholic Church were against this idea of a spherical earth. History shows us otherwise. Now, what about these superstitious sailors that the textbooks speak of? Well, historian James Loewen makes the note that sailors, more than anyone, knew about the spherical nature of the earth. They were using latitude and longitude, which are based on a round earth. They would observe lunar eclipses where the round shadow of the earth would fall across the moon, as well as when they would observe ships in the distance, when they disappeared over that curve of the ocean, their mass would disappear last, as well as reappear first. So, with all of this historical evidence mounting, how in the world did this myth ever get into our history text? Well, to answer that question, we have to go to good old American history. In 1828, an American author by the name of Washington Irving published his book, The Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. Now, this book was the very first to claim that Columbus was out to prove a round earth to a disbelieving audience. Now, you may also recognize the name Washington Irving from his other insightful biographies, such as Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Washington Irving was a sensationalistic author who said himself, "I am always at loss to know how much to believe of my own stories." Now, modern literary critics have talked about Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus and have mentioned that it's less of a biography and more of Irving's own recreation of events. However, because Irving was the first American to achieve international literary acclaim, his writings were caught up enthusiastically. They were incorporated into American textbooks, and the rest, quite frankly, is history.